sports in Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, welcome into the Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local, hard-hitting insight after every game that you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst Deshaun Tate. And, of course, our Hawks Postcast show is a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 podcast network. And, Deshaun, what a way for the Hawks to go into a 6-day break. They bounce back tonight in the district. We'll talk about that. But first, we want to give our takes on how they actually got there. And this was not a gimme type of game because we know that prior to tonight, the Washington Wizards had only won 3 games this season, one of which was against the Hawks. And we know that there are times when the Hawks have played down to their competition. But for you, there was one pesky area as well that the Hawks had shown us that, hey, if they don't like jump on top of this in the beginning of a game, it could be a problem. And that's your take was in part that despite the fact that the turnovers had taken over against the Hawks in prior games, tonight the turnovers played in their favor.
And it definitely did, Tenitra. I think the crazy part is like you said, didn't do all that well with protecting the basketball the other night. However, made sure that since that was the case, then the opposition was going to have that same issue coming up for the very next game.
Yes,
20 turnovers is one that you're just very rarely ever going to have that kind of total and be able to walk away with a win. And a large part of that, due in part because of this was also really crazy about it. We started talking about the steals leader. I think it's 4th in NBA history or what have you. The most consecutive games with a steal being Dyson Daniels. That got broken tonight with no steals. But who would have even anticipated Vit Krejci, who's not really necessarily known for his defense, having 3 steals, assisting and leading the team in steals from that standpoint, and then Alexander Walker with 3 as well. And so stepping up a little bit on the defensive side, I have a little bit of some extra things that I feel my own way about, but because it's a win, I'm trying my best to kind of temper things down a little bit. But I was not a very happy Hawk supporter tonight.
Oh, don't be alarmed because you're not by yourself. I'm right there with you. I said, I know Deshaun and I are like excited about a win because, hey, back-to-back losses, you want to just talk about a dub back in the chat, right? But I said, our audience also knows exactly who we are, and they know we're going to call it what it is. And that leaky,
see it on my face,
that leaky deep defense, like that. Yeah, we got to talk about that, and we will circle back to it on the other side. But I gotta agree with you. Like, are we saying Krejci's defense leading the offense? Like, is Vit Krejci's name in a sentence with defense? And we're like, for real about it. Like, he literally had in that third quarter when the Wizards really made that run, he really was the reason that the Hawks were able to stave them off, just sticking with it defensively, and then also coming back to the other end and making Washington pay with a couple of critical threes. So, yeah, I mean, this is not a conversation that we have very often, except that we've had a lot of good conversation about some of these key bench members being able to do some big things when Quinn Snyder's asked that of them. So it may not seem like a lot in terms of him having a couple steals, a couple rebounds, if you will. But for Vit Krejci to do that in some critical moments and still have an effective game on offense, 5 of 9 from the field, 4 of 8 from 3, I think that's what makes the fact that you can then go into the box score and look at Washington having turned the ball over 20 times and saying, yeah, actually it did matter. Vit Krejci, one of the big reasons that it did matter. But also, I think you call out something that we've called out in the past, which is when you have that team that gets those double-digit turnovers when you're bordering 20, which Washington did have, make them pay. Make sure that you're able to get some points off that. And for me, I was impressed with the 26 points that the Hawks were able to get off those Wizards turnovers. But ultimately, they held the Wizards a little bit more in check. Hawks only had 15 turnovers tonight. If you saw the box score, the stat line from the last couple of nights, you'd know that that was a good thing. But the even better thing when you dig in is the 17 points. That's all the Wizards were able to capitalize on. So the Hawks made sure that they got back in that regard on defense. And I
Mhm.
want to put a little caveat and say
I know
in
you.
that regard. Yeah,
No,
because
I know you do.
make no mistake, we're not pleased with what we saw. Another area that was my take on it, and this is only because this is an ode to my guy Deshaun Tate. When we say that the fundamentals are important, they're important. We
Mhm.
noticed a couple different things. There was in the loss to, I think it was the loss to the Pistons, if you will. I'm sorry, it was the loss to the Clippers. So we looked at that loss to the Clippers and we said, hey, this is Jalen Johnson's stat line. It's identical to
Right.
what and how the Hawks lost. Like it was so obvious. Another stat that was pretty obvious in last night's loss to the Denver Nuggets was free throws. The Hawks didn't have a lot, by the way. There was one point where the Nuggets doubled up on the number of free throws the Hawks had last night, but the Hawks also missed some critical ones. And we know that wasn't the only reason they lost by a point, but that is one of the key reasons why they lost down the stretch as they started to be ineffective from the perimeter and as the Nuggets then started to heat up there. So here tonight, I have to give them flowers and say my take is, whoa, the fundamentals, you pretty much have the same number of free throws, 14, but tonight you hit them all. And it does matter when a game starts to tighten up the way this game did against the Wizards in the third quarter.
It does. And you know what? I can't necessarily tell you that, I do think that the free throw shooting has been, definitely a lot better than it had been in previous weeks. Typically, the field goal shooting, I think, has been really, really up for the majority of the season. However, over the last couple of nights, I feel like we've been more and more, consistent seeing that number dip a little bit. That's where I think that the free throw
Yeah.
shooting obviously becomes such a big part behind what they were obviously able to do on tonight. And because you have
Mhm.
guys out, shocker, no Kristaps Porzingis. And then obviously Trey and maybe a couple other pieces out or what have you. But you need the energy, number one, because you're on another back to back. That is what 6 games and like 8 days, something really ridiculous, and
Yeah.
2 back-to-backs this week in 1 week alone
1 week.
already was
Yeah.
crazy. So I just think that any little bit of extra contribution, especially with everything on the roads, taking energy from you, playing in different time zones. I mean, it seems like the list goes on and on. And that just makes it a little bit more impressive when you're able to see how well that this team competes. When you see the numbers that Alexander Walker has put up, when you see the guys that really have to step up, we know that it sounds cute and cliche and it's just things to kind of say in sports where it's like next man up. But we knew that tonight was a night, though Yeko Kangu could not do it by himself on tonight. So in the front court, he needs
Yeah.
help. You turn to the rookie who's Mr. Consistent, 11 points on tonight. And only missing one shot. You need some help from a guard standpoint. Luke Kennard comes in, he gives you 15. He only missed one shot. Those are the little things that help them beat the team that they really needed to put the exclamation point on a win tonight after what happened 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, most definitely, because that was painful. And I hear you giving that nice shout out, the subtle shout out to Asa Newell, him getting 11 points in 12 minutes. But yeah, low key, the rookie has been doing some solid things for the Hogs, and he is a part of the unit that we have talked about as well, which this unit is a little bit of a sidebar, and I don't want to cut them short. I want to give them their flowers. So,
For
yes,
sure.
there was one of those turning points that, again, it was a run. But for once, it was a run in the Hawks' favor in a 131 116 win over the Washington Wizards tonight. We're going to talk about the turning point, but also giving flowers to 2.0. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is brought to you by DoorDash. So, yes, the NBA season is heating up, and DoorDash is all over it, trying to keep fans in their bag all season long. And DoorDash is, of course, the official on demand delivery service of the NBA, and they are celebrating something really cool. It's called the bag drop. So, every time an NBA player scores 50%, then DoorDash is able to drop 50% off your order with Dash Pass the next day. And you can't get better than that. Like the ultimate fan bag. There have been a couple players even this week who dropped 50 plus. So I'm sure you were able to take advantage of DoorDash. And when they're talking about food, it's not just food, it's drinks, it might be headphones, it could be ice or socks. But as you guys know, DoorDash can get about anything to your door. So again, the next time someone goes off in the NBA for 50 points, you've got to take advantage of it. and you've got to use the promo code. The promo code is NBA50 in order for you to take advantage of the drop. So stick with DoorDash. Now, if you want more information and you want to get more details on it, of course, understanding and confirming that there are no purchases that are necessary and that this deal is on until April 13th, then you check out DoorDashInYourBag.com. Again, that's DoorDashInYourBag.com because DoorDash is in your bag all season long. This episode of our Hawks Postcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. Now, FanDuel, got to tell you, it's all about Sundays, NFL Sundays to be exact. And the one big play is what happens, and suddenly the game just changes on a dime and everything is different. Well, that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so cool. The reason being, you're able to do everything and just kind of react real time. So as you're watching your team, you can place bets as the action unfolds. It's every drive, every swing, every highlight moment. And live betting is best when the game starts to shift. I mean, a receiver starts to really get those yards after the catch, or that running back is able to get to the second level. So the live spreads and the money lines, they adjust instantly. That's how FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. The player prop bets, man, they update just as guys are heating up, and you can even bet on the very next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, etc. So if you want to be in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com to place your NFL live bets all season long. Again, that's FanDuel.com because FanDuel is where the game moves fast, and so can you. So normally, Deshaun, you know the bane of my existence, and that is runs in the NBA because I feel like where's the kind of the trade-off and sort of that competition of saying, hey, you just got a basket, but I'm not going to let you get another basket. But then again, sometimes it kind of goes in the Hawks' favor, and then all of a sudden it's not such a big deal, right? And really one of those big runs after the Wizards started to kind of creep back into this game in the third quarter, and at one point it was tied 97 all. Then all of a sudden, right around that 9-minute mark in the fourth quarter, you start to see the Hawks retake the lead and reset themselves. And that's where this game turned. That was the turning point.
Time to reveal where the game was won or lost. It's the turning point.
So, Deshaun, it got a little scary in the district tonight because we're thinking back to 10, 12 days ago, the Wizards, the team that at that point had only won, one game? And all of a sudden the Hawks become their second or third victim of the season. And you're walking away with a really bad taste in your mouth, right? And then real talk, it's still an Eastern Conference team. So you definitely don't take kindly to those Eastern Conference losses because you never know how and when they might hurt you in a tiebreaker. So this was not a gimme game for the Hawks at all. And when that game got tied up 97 all, especially because we know how it happened. It was the same way we saw the Denver Nuggets do it last night. And it was the same way we saw the Clippers sprint away from the Hawks a couple nights ago. And that was from the 3-point line, except that the Hawks then went on an 8-0 run. You started seeing players hit for the Hawks that had been quiet. And then that run ballooned to 18-5. 7 players with the Hawks end up in double digits. And where the run ultimately ends, when you kind of knew the game was in hand, was around that 5-minute mark when the Hawks were on a 20-8 run. And you really felt like they were in control at that point.
It was, Tanisha, and I'm going to tell you something else. And I feel like this is, we start talking about guys that have been overly consistent and just showing a lot of love. I'm not sure that we've really shown nearly as much to Vit Krejci as I think that he deserves, not only being ranked, I think still, as he has been much of this year, second in the NBA in field goal percentage. But he has held on to that for quite some time. And it isn't because, you can do that as long as you're attempting this minimal amount. Like, no, he's getting shots up. He's on a heater. And he was a big part of this run, obviously. And much, to the credit also of some other guys. I think that, a point in time when Onyeka Okongwu was just really eating up in the middle, couldn't be stopped. Zachary Reese-Sachet, who I have been a believer in just constantly watching him get better and better of movement without the ball and being a rim runner, getting dunks and breakaways, just doing little things to kind of get between the teeth of the defense to showcase exactly what he was drafted for here,
Yeah.
his athleticism on both sides of the ball, stepping up defensively to help, create some of those turnovers that we talked a little bit in the last segment. So you create, you credit all these guys, but I think especially a night like tonight where it just really looked like the typical Jalen Johnson doing Jalen
Yeah.
Johnson things, but
Yep.
somebody else has to be the person that's going to be able to do this in big sample sizes. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is only one person. It's going to take group effort from different
Yeah.
guys being consistent, and if not, it has to be switched in and out between different guys. Tonight, that guy was V. Krejci, and I love what I've been able to see out of him ever since the beginning. If there is a surprise person this year on this roster, it's been B. Krejci for me this year.
Yeah. V. Krejci, most definitely. Probably my guy would be Nickeil Alexander-Walker, just because of the offense that he's been able to bring to the table. But yeah, I give Vita a whole lot of credit too, because again, when that run started for the Hawks, V. Krejci hit a couple of big threes, and the Hawks had really kind of gone quiet before that on offense. So I give him a lot of credit for that, but also for sticking in there. Defense is not that's not his thing. But
Yeah.
for playing ball, being kind about that, but for playing ball all 94 feet at both ends, I got to give him a whole lot of credit. Also, two guys bounced back tonight for different reasons, right? So shout out to Alexander Walker, because yeah, it's rough when you go for a layup and your team needs a three and you don't kick it out and you lose the game by a point. That's what happened last night. That was a tough way for him to go. But he bounced back tonight with a decent 7 to 15 night from shooting, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 steals. So I just wanted to say, hey, way to get your head back in the game less than 24 hours later to give your team a much needed win. And Luke Kennard, because there was one moment last night where if Luke Kennard had just he had one job, and that was to hit a three at a certain clip in the game, and he didn't. And I was like, come on, Luke Kennard, you got one job. That is why you were brought here. And tonight, good bounce back for him, putting that behind him. He was 6 of 7 from the field, but more importantly, 3 of 4 from three. And then also Luke Kennard, not one we talk about very often,
Mhm.
contributing at the defensive end, but he was able to grab 3 boards, get a couple dimes, and even a couple of steals, and also just one of those turnovers for the Hawks. So again, think about this, Deshaun. You alluded to it earlier, but
Mhm.
going back to this is your bench showing
Sure.
a lot of promise
That's
early
right.
in the season and showing a lot of promise on the road. No team in the association has traveled
Utilizing theirs as
more.
much. No. Yeah.
Yeah, like literally, no team in the association has traveled and had more road games than the Hawks, and that's a combination because you mentioned it earlier. It's not just the number of games, 8 of those kind of built-in road trips, if you will, compared to everyone
Mhm.
else. Also, the most number of back-to-backs in the season so far, but also the most traveled, meaning they're the ones going from like the southeast to the west coast to the Midwest up to Canada and back down the east coast. So it's like for the bench and those young players to be able to step up and step through that. And it looks like the number 7 points doesn't say a big deal about Zachary Risachet, but it's like you said, the consistency of starting to score again. Got to give that
Mhm.
young guy some credit too, in being able to stay the course just to kind of get themselves through until this coming Friday when they play again.
And then in closing remarks, not just the road traveled, but when you start talking about bench players that have probably played the most minutes of anybody in the NBA, I'm pretty sure, just because of the
Oh
important
yes,
guys that got hurt so early. I mean, think about it. I mean,
sure.
the production and contribution that somebody like a Nickeil Alexander Walker has brought, it's almost like what really DeJounte Murray had to do when Trey went down for X amount of games
Yes,
on that
yeah.
injury before, and he kind of stood in that gap and had to kind of become that leader, if you will. Kind of reminds me of some similar situations and expected to play a similar role and take some similar shots that this team really needs in order for it to win. So I'm glad to see that he has been able to be consistent from that standpoint as well, because that's kind of a new role for him. He hasn't been
Yeah.
asked to do such things since he's had the NBA, logo patched on his uniform. So that's definitely a good call by you on who, has been a really big piece for this team so far this year that has been contributing some high volume.
Yeah, congratulations to the Hawks, winners tonight against the Washington Wizards, 131 and to 160 in the finals. So this team able to get back in the win column. They of course have a serious break, and then they come back Friday, taking on the Detroit Pistons in Detroit. Thanks so much to our everydayers, of course, for making this your number one stop after all Hawks games. This podcast is the number one place to hang out on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And of course, we appreciate you guys subscribing to us at our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. And right now, we'll see you next time.